The wind is rising, and one injured hunter can no longer match the group's pace. Ahead lies shelter. Behind them, the storm is already erasing every track they made. The group must choose, move faster without him, or risk everyone by slowing down. In the Ice Age, compassion was never separate from survival. It carried a cost. So why did prehistoric people sometimes protect those who could no longer hunt? The answer begins with a simple truth: injury was not unusual in a dangerous world. Falls, fractures, infection, worn joints, and damaged teeth all left marks on bone. Some injuries healed for months or years before the person finally died. Healing proves survival. But survival alone does not prove someone was helpless. A person with one weak arm might still gather fuel, shape tools, teach, or navigate. Disability is not the same as uselessness, and prehistoric life was not one fixed job. Small groups survived by combining abilities, not by making every person identical. Care could mean carrying water, softening food, guarding sleep, or changing a route. It could also mean something quieter, making room for a different way of working. Before we call this compassion, we must ask what the bones can truly tell us. Bones record trauma, disease, growth, and repair, but not the thoughts behind them. Archaeologists therefore separate direct evidence from cautious reconstruction. A healed fracture is direct. Daily nursing is often an inference from survival. And the longer survival seems impossible alone, the stronger that inference becomes. Yet even severe-looking bodies may have belonged to highly capable individuals. Modern assumptions can turn difference into dependence faster than evidence allows. The safest question is not, who was useless, but, how was life reorganized? And that system may have been one of humanity's oldest survival technologies. Care begins with time to rest, heal, eat, and avoid another dangerous strain. It also needs calories, because an injured body still consumes food and warmth. In a lean season, every extra mouth could tighten the margin between life and death. But abandoning experience could also be costly when knowledge was stored in people. A slower hunter might still remember water, migration paths, weather, and stone. Care may have protected not only a body, but a living archive of survival. That makes the decision harder: feed one person now, or lose what only they know. What would your group protect first? Speed, food, knowledge, or loyalty? One of the clearest cases comes from Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains. There, a Neanderthal known as Shanidar I survived with several major impairments. His right forearm and hand were absent, and his shoulder showed severe wasting. A crushing injury around the left eye probably reduced part of his vision. Changes in his leg and foot suggest an abnormal gait and reduced agility. His spine and joints also carried signs of painful degenerative disease. Then researchers identified bony growths narrowing both of his ear canals. Those growths likely caused serious hearing loss, especially on the right side. For a mobile forager, limited hearing could make coordination and danger harder. Combined with his other conditions, it may have increased his need for support. Shanidar I lived into roughly his 40s, old for the skeletal sample around him. His survival is often presented as evidence of Neanderthal compassion. But it does not prove he spent his life passive, dependent, or unable to contribute. Recent scholarship warns that disability can include expertise, adaptation, and agency. So Shanidar I may have received help while also remaining a valuable, active person. That distinction matters because care is not the opposite of independence. People can rely on others and still make decisions, work, teach, and lead. Every human life already depends on shared food, shared warning, and shared memory. A missing arm changes technique, but it does not erase knowledge or judgment. Hearing loss changes communication, but groups can use sight, touch, and position. Reduced speed changes travel, but routes, loads, and timing can also change. Care may therefore appear in bones only after 1,000 invisible adjustments. Archaeology sees the result, not every quiet decision that produced it. That is why a single skeleton can open a question, but never close it. At some sites, survival may reflect direct nursing after trauma or surgery. At others, people may have adapted tasks around lifelong physical difference. Others may have lived with permanent differences that shaped their social roles. The archaeological record rarely tells us which arrangement felt fair or loving. It also cannot show every person whose condition left no mark on bone. So the cases we know are only a narrow window into a much larger human reality. Still, that narrow window is enough to challenge the myth of constant abandonment. If your body changed tomorrow, which skill could still make you essential? One powerful case comes from the late Upper Paleolithic site of Romito in Italy. The individual called Romito II lived with a rare form of short-limbed dwarfism. Researchers estimate this person reached adolescence or early adulthood. Their body would have changed reach, stride, leverage, and some daily movements. But the skeleton does not tell us that Romito too was incapable of useful work. A bioarchaeology of care study proposed accommodation of difference instead. That may not have required constant hands-on nursing from the wider group. They may simply have organized activities so participation remained possible. Yet it may reveal something profound: belonging can be built into routine. Romito too was also buried within the community's shared mortuary landscape. Burial alone cannot reveal affection, status, or the exact meaning of inclusion. But life into adolescence shows years of survival with a visible difference. That survival likely depended on both personal adaptation and social context. The safest conclusion is not pity, but social and practical flexibility. A capable group could change the work before deciding to discard the worker. That principle may have strengthened small communities facing unstable climates. Because resilience is not only resisting change, it is reorganizing around it. At Cima de los Huesos, researchers studied a child known as Cranium 14. The skull had premature fusion along one side, changing its shape during growth. The child survived for several years while living with this congenital condition. The condition may have affected development, though its full impact remains uncertain. Some researchers see the survival as evidence of care beyond ordinary infancy. Others remind us that the fossil cannot measure the exact level of dependence. What it proves is simpler: physical difference existed deep in human prehistory. And at least some children with serious conditions survived beyond infancy. Their communities were not identical, and one case cannot speak for every group. But the case widens the timeline of survival with difference by hundreds of millennia. Then, in Borneo, one late Pleistocene burial revealed something even more direct. A young person had undergone deliberate removal of the lower left leg. The bone healed cleanly, without signs that the person died soon after the procedure. Researchers estimate survival continued for another 6 to 9 years. That required control of bleeding, infection, pain, and long-term recovery. The operation took place roughly 31,000 years before the present. This was not an Ice Age tundra camp, but it was a Pleistocene foraging society. Its lesson is crucial: sophisticated care did not begin with farming or cities. Still, one successful operation does not prove the same knowledge existed everywhere. The patient was later intentionally buried, but the meaning of that burial is unknown. What remains certain is years of life after a procedure that demanded cooperation. Care here was not a brief emotion. It was a long chain of practical decisions. What would be hardest to provide for years? Food, protection, patience, or skill? Long-term care begins with ordinary materials rather than miraculous medicine. Fire warms the body, dries coverings, softens food, and makes night safer. Hides and plant fibers can support, wrap, cushion, or stabilize an injured limb. Water must be carried, fuel gathered, and food processed into manageable forms. A person with damaged teeth may survive better when meat and plants are softened. Yet tooth loss alone does not prove dependence. People can adapt in many ways. Shelter placement can reduce distance, wind exposure, and repeated strain. Load sharing can keep one person's limitation from stopping the whole group. Communication can change too, using gesture, eye contact, touch, and formation. None of these behaviors fossilize cleanly, so they remain cautious reconstructions. What survives archaeologically is the body after those possible systems had acted. That makes prehistoric care appear both visible and invisible at the same time. Migration would have made every one of these support systems especially difficult. A slower pace means more exposure, more fuel, and fewer hours before darkness. Carrying another adult over rough ground would consume enormous energy. But groups could choose shorter stages, safer routes, or longer seasonal stops. They could also redistribute tools, food, children, and raw materials. The cost of care was therefore real, but rarely limited to one dramatic sacrifice. More often, the cost was probably paid through hundreds of small adjustments. Repeated adjustments could also have created stronger trust inside the group. A hunter who receives care today may protect, teach, or provide tomorrow. But reciprocity should not be assumed in every case or treated as a hidden contract. People may have helped for kinship, affection, duty, reputation, or practical value. The exact motive behind any single act is usually beyond archaeology's reach. Still, repeated survival with impairment shows that human groups were often flexible. Care was not guaranteed, universal, or equal across every place and time. Harsh conditions could narrow choices, and not every injured person survived. The record is biased toward bones that preserved and sites archaeologists found. Soft tissue illness, chronic pain, and many sensory differences may leave nothing. Even healed injuries can result from self-care rather than constant assistance. And a burial does not automatically prove love, honor, or social equality. Scientific caution does not weaken the story. It keeps the people real. We do not need to invent perfect compassion to reject the myth of savagery. The evidence supports survival, adaptation, and at least some social support. What remains unknown is how each person felt, and why each group chose as it did. Now return to the storm, where our traveling group still faces its decision. The injured hunter cannot recover his former speed before the darkness arrives. But he knows a narrow ravine where the wind weakens and dry wood collects. The group shifts the route, divides his load, and shortens the day's march. They lose distance, yet gain shelter, dry fuel, and a much safer night. He is not saved because he is useless. He is saved as part of the system. Tomorrow, someone else may be injured, old, pregnant, sick, or simply exhausted. A community that can reorganize does more than preserve a single human life. It preserves knowledge, trust, and the chance to survive the next crisis together. The oldest survival tool may not have been stone, fire, or strength alone. It may have been the choice to keep making room for one another when life changed. Which next glacial story should we uncover? Healing, elders, childhood, or migration?